Ohio there, this is Kermit the Frog.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Fascinating.
I'm a doctor, not a mechanic.
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
Most illogical.
Aye, sir.
Well, that was different. Yep, lousy, but different.
Places, please. And here we go.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, bears, Cardassians, and things, to episode 115 of the MuppeTrek Podcast. I'm Steve.
And I'm Jarman, and we're here to compare, contrast, and confer about our two favorite franchises. And what are those, Steve?
The Muppets and Star Trek. We're going to be doing one-to-one reviews of The Muppet Show and Star Trek The Next Generation.
And tonight we're covering up Muppet Show with special guest star Hal Linden and Star Trek The Next Generation episode Datalore.
But before we get to that new goodness, Jarman, do you have any reviews or feedback for us?
I do. So our first comment is from Spotify. The first one we've gotten from Spotify.
I kind of forgot we were on the Spotify.
Yeah, we're just on all the platforms, just chugging away. Whoever wants to listen, wherever they want to listen. And
yeah, man, you should check us out on Spotify.
You can. I was unaware that it has automatic questions set up for every episode so that listeners can respond with feedback. But you can change the question you want to ask, but it defaults for every episode to, what did you think of this episode? Just ask that basic question. But apparently we can change it for every episode, which I'm not going to do, so that's a lot of work.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, maybe sometime down the line. But our first episode is for our very first episode, what do you think of this episode? Someone named Camilo Corrales said, great episode. 2 of my favorite shows. Keep it up. Just started the podcast and it's great. So Camilo.
So wait, that was on our first episode.
The very first episode.
But it was a recent comment?
They just commented on it. Yeah.
Man.
So yeah, because we haven't always been on Spotify, but when I added our RSS feed to Spotify, which I'm glad to see the early episodes are still working on there too. It's on there. So someone just found our podcast, started at the very beginning.
Thank you, Camilo.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Camilo, yeah. And so I think he'll hear this probably much farther down the line if he's going down the whole episode list. But I responded to him basically saying that, you are target audience, because if you like both those shows, this is the podcast for you.
That's right.
Yeah. And then on Facebook, 2 of our friends in podcasting from the Epsilon 3 and Cosmic Pizza podcasts commented. They were talking about me having a brain fart last episode because I was on cold medicine and I couldn't.
The place where they do the things.
I couldn't think of the term bridge for Star Trek.
Great.
So Paul Wright says, Jarman Day is in top form in this episode. And he says, the bridge, Jarman, it's the fucking bridge.
That's right.
And Daniel Peter Hitch then said, sometimes you just need a control center, decision place, deck where people make choices.
He's not wrong.
I'm glad I didn't cut that out because I almost did. And I was like, no, just leaving it in because who cares?
Yeah, that was good.
So, Steve, tell us about the guest for this episode, Hal Linden.
Well, Hal Linden was an actor of stage and screen. He came up through the stage, earning Tony Award for Best Actor for his role in The Rothschilds. His most famous role would have come not long before this appearance, and I think he was either just finishing or still maybe in the middle of it. He played Barney Miller on the popular show Barney Miller.
Yeah.
A sort of comedy cop drama. It ran for 8 seasons, and he snagged 7 Emmy Awards for it.
And I'd never seen a single episode. I've always heard of it, but never seen it.
But what does our audience know him from? Well, he still averages a few IMDb credits a year, with his most recent being in 2023, with one-shot appearances on shows like Will and Grace, The King of Queens, The Mindy Project, Two Broke Girls, and Law & Order SVU.
Wow. Good for him.
So relatively recent stuff.
Still chugging along.
But what is he up to on The Muppet Show this week? Well, backstage, Statler and Waldorf are for some reason in charge of the show, and they struggle to keep it on track, canceling Gonzo's numbers. There's a sudden rebooking of the Sauerkraut Oompa band. Hal's number gets canceled by a very angry and upset Link Hogthrob. But then they can't figure out, they put him back on, but then they can't decide if it's going to be a patriotic number or a Christmas number. Beauregard, for some reason, starts messing with trap door levers, and people start falling, including himself, causing further trouble and mayhem. On stage this week, Kermit and Fozzie interrupt from the balcony, explaining that Statler and Waldorf are going to be hosting this show this week. Mm-hmm. Statler and Waldorf introduce Hal Linden, but first we get Jerry and the Adrix. A group of elderly women hit the stage and sing "Who Put the Bomp in the Bomp a Bomp a Bomp." It's a lively number with singing, chattering teeth. A group of up next, a German Oompa band throwing sauerkraut around the stage sing like a lively Oompa drinking song about sauerkraut. Following this, we have Hal in a sort of an evolving Uncle Sam costume. He sings just a myriad of patriotic songs. Gonzo pulls in on a sleigh and starts singing Christmas standards, and the medley mashes up and ends with both fireworks and snow. We then find ourselves on a UK corner in a market where two musician and a stall vendor and just a menagerie of dogs sing "Obla Di Obla Da." Hitting the stage is Miss Piggy, dressed in a stereotypical Middle Eastern Indian garb, who sings to a tiger wearing a stereotypical Middle Eastern Indian hat. And she sings "An Old-Fashioned Girl" about how she wants a simple life and a millionaire husband. It's terrible from a lot of different angles, folks. Next on stage, Hal joins a brass band with his clarinet, and they perform a rousing ragtime version of "When the Saints Go Marching In." Trapdoors continue to open, chaos is caused. Statler and Waldorf thank Hal Linden. Kermit and Fozzie cut them off and also thank Hal Linden. And that is what we call the Muppet Show. So, Jeremy, what did you think of this week's episode of the Muppet Show with Hal Linden?
Did you think he was playing that clarinet?
He was.
That's pretty awesome.
He actually got his I don't know if it was live, but he actually got his start as a big band musician.
It looked like he was playing.
His background is in music. He's played the clarinet. Why would a celebrity, what would a celebrity have to gain from faking playing a clarinet?
I mean, people have faked instruments on this show before, so I don't know.
That's true, but not to this extent. This was like a full musical number.
It was, yeah. It was very impressive, actually. I really enjoyed this episode. I think the whole aspect of Statler and Waldorf taking over for Kermit was a great idea, and how they kind of interspersed that throughout the whole episode, and them finding out it's not as easy as they think to run the chaotic Muppet Show. It's really difficult. And I wasn't familiar with Hal Linden. I knew the name. I've heard about Barney Miller, but never seen it. And I think he did a great job interacting with the Muppets, and just showed that he was a really good kind of host of this show, because he's just kind of a standard performer. He can, like you said, background in music, he had a decent job singing and dancing, and he never really did a character per se, but he did a lot of costumes and the instruments and the physical comedy and with the trap doors and all that stuff. I think he did a great job with all that. And we didn't get our typical sketches, but it kind of made sense for the whole premise that Statler and Waldorf canceled everything. So they wanted their own kind of show, so that those numbers weren't there. But yet at the same time, the Muppets infiltrated all those numbers anyway. So it became really funny in that way. I don't know. What'd you think?
I thought this episode was trash.
What? I love this episode.
I feel like Hal Linden was so mild. So mild. That being said, one number I didn't mention actually isn't in the Disney version, which was maybe my favorite.
Oh.
It's in the scene with him and Robin ended with a song.
I was thinking that was really short.
As opposed to Gonzo jumping in and having like a one-liner.
Yeah, that was weird.
So the best musical number was cut from the Disney version, admittedly. But between the fact that there were no standard sketches, I felt like Hal really didn't connect with the Muppets, nor did he have an opportunity to.
Yeah.
I don't think he was the only failure here. He talked with Robin in that one sketch, but otherwise he was playing with the big band. He was in that big, crazy musical patriotic number where he wasn't interacting. He was just performing. So in that regard, this missed two of the three major hallmarks of a good episode for me. The only one it hit was that the backstage plot was like a driving force for what happened on stage.
It's weird because I those things were missing for me too, but I excuse the no sketches one because they kind of explain that because of the backstage plot, things are canceled. And then the interactions that he did have with them, I thought were great, but you're right in that he didn't have direct interactions with them in a lot of scenes, especially.
You just didn't have the opportunity to. And that's not his fault.
That scene with Robin, I didn't know about that too.
Yeah. So that was just my overall issue. I think this really falls, for this season at least, pretty close to the bottom.
Wow.
If not, bottom 3 probably.
This is one of my top ones.
Mind you, there are episodes in other seasons that completely eclipse this in awfulness.
Oh, of course. Yes.
Like there are other, like this is not that bad. It's just this season I feel like it's been such like a lot of high points.
That's fair.
This season.
Yeah, I think I love the production of the numbers, like the whole 4th of July Christmas thing was crazy and outlandish.
That was
and
fun.
The trapdoors was
fun.
nuts with the big band. And I don't know. I thought there was a lot of big set pieces and fun stuff in this episode. So I kind of enjoyed it. Fair enough.
Okay, we've had a couple other episodes we've just completely diametrically disagreed on.
Not that often, but yeah, it happens occasionally.
We've had a few where we just go, nah, this is shit. What do you mean? It's great.
That's true. Well, that's a good. I'm glad. We have some contention there.
Well, music this week. Who put the bump in the bump to bump to bump? That's actually the full title of the song. Written by and performed by Barry Mann. So for me, for our generation, we grew up with this as like a doo-wop standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the time it was released, it was considered a comedy novelty song because it was making fun of the made-up words and noises that other contemporary doo-wop groups were singing.
That's funny.
That was the whole point of the song. But now we hear it and we think of it as a standard.
But really, it was making fun of those other songs.
At that time, it was a comedy song.
That's funny.
Drinking song. This is the sauerkraut song from the 1924 operetta, The Student Prince. This one specifically was very successful because the musical came out during Prohibition in the 20s. And so the lyrics of the song became very, very popular with rowdy theater goers who opposed Prohibition.
Makes sense.
And kind of became a theme song. The Yankee Doodle Boy. This is one of the many songs that was sung in that like medley of Christmas and whatnot. So I chose one Christmas song, one patriotic song. I didn't know this, but this is from a Broadway musical. It's called Little Johnny Jones. It's the story of an American jockey who goes to Britain to compete in the English Derby. On his way there, a wealthy heiress falls in love with him. So what does she do? She disguises herself as a man so she can follow him there. Jingle Bells, written by James Lord Pierpont in Massachusetts in the 1850s. He fought in the Civil War and wrote many songs for the Confederacy. And he died in Winter Haven, Florida in 1893.
Go figure.
Obla Di Obla Da from Paul McCartney and the Beatles. The phrase itself comes from a Nigerian conga player named Jimmy Scott Imwakapor, who McCartney knew. And The Life Goes On was something that he said. This guy, this Nigerian Congo player.
I didn't know that.
Conga. If we ruled the world from the West End musical Pickwick. This is another one where I had to look it up because I'd never heard of this. It's the story of two guys who start out in like a beggar's prison or a poorhouse prison. And it's them recounting the series of unfortunate events that led them there. So it's a real pick-me-up.
Oh, yeah. Most Robin songs are big pick-me-up.
Just an Old-Fashioned Girl, written by Marv A. Fisher. It was made famous after being recorded by Eartha Kitt. This song, though, came towards the end of her U.S. popularity, just as she was picking up steam in the UK, and it became her signature song in the UK, and is even mentioned in a Monty Python Flying Circus episode.
Oh, wow.
That's right. When the Saints Go Marching In, the song is actually an amalgamation of a few other black spirituals from the time, including a song called When the Saints Are Marching In and When the Saints March In from Crownings. All these songs were sort of combined into a best of, and the earliest recording comes from 1923 by the Paramount Records singers.
Interesting.
But this one was tough to nail down any real information on.
Huh.
Surprisingly.
Yeah, it's a popular song.
I know. So, Jarvin, what did you think was the best Muppeteering moment this week?
Surprisingly, I'm going to go with Jerry and the Atrix with Who Put the Bump. The rest of it's in parentheses where I found it. So I just put Who Put the Bump.
And the bump.
And I said because it gave me a real Showbiz Pizza Chuck E. Cheese band kind of feel,
Because they didn't move around a lot.
And they're all, they're like almost like they're animatronics and their legs are going up and down, and kind of thing. And you could see, but you could also see from head to toe, like it wasn't like regular.
Yeah, everyone was on a stool or upright.
Yeah. So that must be a lot of puppeteers just for each one of those old ladies. That's really impressive. And it was, it gave me that nostalgia feel for Showbiz Pizza and Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, and that wasn't my Muppeteering moment, but I also did really enjoy it. I just enjoyed you get to hear so many Muppet performers do old lady voices.
Yeah.
Like every different Muppet performer got to do an old lady voice.
I'll take the old ladies over the babies anytime.
I know you hate those babies.
Hate them damn babies.
My best Muppeteering moment this week, I'm going to give it to the Salzburg Sauerkraut Singers, because it is very clear to me that the puppeteers really had a lot of fun throwing sauerkraut at each other. You could see that they were trying to unload on top of each other's heads during the song as plates were reloaded.
Just throw it everywhere.
But you could tell with the way they were pitching it, they were trying to pitch it onto each other. And I think that fun really came through the entire performance because of that.
That's true.
So, Jarman, what happened on this week's episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation?
Well, today we have Datalore, a very seminal episode here. The Enterprise is stopping by the planet Omicron Theta, the place where Data was originally found by Starfleet 26 years ago. And there used to be lots of farmland there with these colonists that were tending to it, but when they arrive, it seems all biological life has been exterminated from the planet, including the colonists, with no apparent explanation. So the away team eventually finds a hidden lab where Dr. Noonien Soong apparently had been working and making his androids among the colonists. And he had apparently left Earth long ago when everyone thought he had failed in his quest to make a positronic brain that would be needed for sentient androids. But apparently not, because he made Data on this planet and had left him with all the memories of the colonists that died there. But in the secret lab, they also find another Data-like android disassembled in storage. So they take the disassembled android back to the Enterprise to put him together with help from Data, because he allows them to open him up to figure out how he works so they can put this other one together. And in the process, Data allows Dr. Crusher to know where his off switch is so she can make him unconscious during the procedure. And that's what we call Chekhov's gun there a little bit. They successfully put the new android together, and he awakens and tells them that his name is Lore and that Data was made first, but he wasn't perfect. So Soong then made him, and he is more perfect. And he pretends to the rest of the crew that he's naive and doesn't know a lot of things and not nearly as smart as he actually is. But once in private, he reveals to Data that he is very smart and human-like. He can use contractions, he has emotions, and that he was actually made first, but was disassembled, and then Data was made so that he would be more subservient and, to the humans and less, independent. But he also tells Data that a crystalline entity, space entity, was responsible for destroying all life and the colonists on Omicron Theta. Lore then knocks out Data with some kind of android sedative in his drink, and he's going to contact the crystalline entity to come destroy the Enterprise crew. The bridge notices him trying to make outside contact to this entity, so for some reason they send Wesley to investigate. I don't know, that's not safe at all for a child. But Wesley arrives at Data's quarters to find what appears to be Lore knocked out on the ground because they switched uniforms. And then Lore impersonates Data and tells Wesley that Lore attacked him, so he switched him off. And Wesley is deeply suspicious, but pretends nothing is wrong. And just then the entity starts approaching the ship, and Lore, pretending to be Data, goes to the bridge and tells the captain that he can talk to the entity. And he seems to convince the entity not to attack them, and since these humans are very powerful. And he tells the captain they should transport a tree near the entity and then blow it up to convince the entity of how powerful they are. So Picard tells Lore to make it so, which confuses Lore, and Picard's like, that means go. So that makes Picard suspicious. So Picard sends a security detail after Lore, but Lore blocks them off from the elevator and kicks Worf's ass, which is really impressive. Meanwhile, Dr. Crusher and Wesley go back to turn Data on, and they then go down to the transporter room to stop Lore because apparently he wants to turn off the ship's shields to allow the entity to destroy all the biological entities on board. And a fight ensues, and eventually they knock Lore onto the transporter pad and transport him off into space. And then the entity goes off into space as well, leaving the Enterprise alone. And then the episode ends fairly abruptly right after that. And that's the end of the episode. So, Steve, what'd you think of this Datalore episode?
All right. So this is probably not a controversial opinion, but this is by a pretty big margin my favorite episode so far.
Yeah, it's not a controversial opinion at all. It's a very classic episode. It can't be. Unless every episode after this is immaculate, this one was a really good episode. Mm-hmm.
Things I liked, we got lore, both as a character and as a concept.
I have the same thing in my notes too.
I thought, what is it, Brent Spiner? Is that right?
Yeah.
Best acting of the entire show so far this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Him carrying off the subtle differences between lore and Data made them completely separate characters in a very good, recognizable way. There was very little confusion about who was who or the motions that were being played or the characters being played. Like, Brent Spiner did great.
Done with great restraint. Yeah, like it wasn't too much.
You add to that the fact that there were some very clever camera tricks, not always doubles, some great mirror split screen stuff that was used very well to really good effect on multiple occasions.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good episode and it moved well. It felt short because everything led to something else. There was very little downtime, which is something that some of these early episodes I'm seeing suffer from.
Mm-hmm.
The crystalline thing was a good driver, external force, external pressure, met by the internal pressure of lore, made for a good packed episode. There were only a few things I really struggled with.
Oh, yeah.
Data's lack of curiosity, like right at the beginning of the episode, when was the sneeze thing?
Yeah.
His lack of curiosity surrounding his own origins at the beginning felt weird.
I feel like it was trying to establish that he was, I think it was trying to establish, it might not have been, but that he is showing that he is more concerned about the future and being human than he is about where he came from in the past. Yeah. That's kind of like,
I got that. It felt like a strange position to take.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing that I really struggled with is, why did everybody this episode act like Wesley hasn't saved the entire crew 6 or 7 times at this point?
Agreed.
It was incredibly aggravating. Now, mind you, there was some, I don't know, bad acting choices, bad directing, in that we have never seen Wesley act like a little punk shit before. So why would he suddenly start acting like a punk shit here?
I'm not going with him unless you make me do it.
We're right. But it could have easily been him saying, like, I think that Lore and Data have switched places. This is the reason why, Captain. And Captain Picard would have been like, we're restraining them both till we figure it out.
Yeah.
And then but they made him have to be a punk kid to give the rest of the crew something to push back against. And it didn't make any sense.
It's like they just want to create that meme of shut up, Wesley.
He has saved the crew literally 7 to 9 times at this point.
The whole ship.
Why now are they not just choosing not to believe him? It didn't make any sense for me and really led to a very strange shift at the late part of the episode.
I could see that. Yeah.
And I like that we got to see some action. We got to see some fights. We got to see Beverly Crusher with her arm on fire at one point.
Yes. Running away with her arm on fire.
Yeah, just running with her arm on fire. So in that regard, that's maybe one of the things I struggled with was the weird choices that Picard and Riker made that just didn't feel right for what we've seen so far.
Right. And I think in addition to that, what made it still work is that there's so many good like ensemble moments of everyone had like a little character moment. Even like Lieutenant Yar brings up her concerns. It's just you trust Data. And I love these cheesy moments that are like showing you how wonderful society is, where Picard then says to the whole crew on the bridge, he's like, just so you know, that was a professional question for her to ask, and she was right to ask it. And then Wesley says basically the same thing, and he's like, shut up, Wesley.
No, I'm the one who trained him. The fault is with me, Captain. Like, I was like, what? What just happened?
That too. Yeah. It's like, Jesus.
Maybe that was the big suspension of disbelief that I couldn't go with.
Yeah.
Like, Just Wesley has proven himself to be more than a kid over and over and over again.
Yeah, he's like, and he even says, he's like, if a lieutenant had said that same thing to you, you would have listened to them. And he's like, shut up, go away.
Even Data says to Lore, because Lore's like, he's just a child. He's like, he's proven himself repeatedly to be more than a child.
Yeah.
He even says that.
So the writers were confused as well. I like that it has some early moments of you're seeing Geordi, kind of taking an interest in Data and stuff like that. And because they become such good friends over time. And so it's like, this is early showing, like they're kind of building that base up of them being friends. Like, and Worf getting his ass kicked was awesome. I love that.
Oh, yeah.
He gets his ass kicked a lot, so it's fun.
And then even you and talked about it already, but I loved the reveal that Lore was built to perfect Data when really it was Lore was built first, and he freaked people out and scared people because he was too perfect. But then that just further illustrates the journey that Data has to go on to find humanity.
Right. Not just be thrown into it.
Himself, not to be thrown into it. And that's why he's accepted, because he's worked to get there. Yeah.
And he's like learning about himself just like humans do. Whereas, Lore thinks he's got it all figured out from the get-go. He's superior in every way. I'm going to kick some ass, take over the universe.
Yeah. But no, this is, I did not think it would be a controversial opinion. My money said that most people probably rate this one of the best episodes of this season. Yeah, and it's up there as like an episode everybody remembers, a lot of essential lists, because it establishes a lot of lore, as we said. Yeah, upper level episode for me too so far, especially compared to some of the duds we've watched this season. There have been a few. That is true. So with these good episodes that are very popular, there is a little extra trivia than usual. Right. So the director of the episode, Rob Bowman, he credited Brent Spiner, like you said, the acting there, for making the episode work. He gave one example, said he did the one scene in his own office with Brent sitting down and Lore discussing what it's like to be human. He did one side, we shot through a double, then turned around, read it the other way, and shot the other half of it. Those two characters in those scenes are different people. He really painted those characters differently. And I was like, yeah, he really did. According to Will Wheaton, the stand-in actor used in this episode really irritated Brent Spiner and was never used again. He described the stand-in as looking like a break dancer doing the robot whenever he had to portray Data or Lore, and said that I think the guy was really into playing an android and his enthusiasm got cranked up to 11. But by the end of the week, pretty much everyone wanted to deactivate him and sell him to the nearest Jawa, which I enjoy. Wow. That's how much he's hated, that they combine different Star universes. Wars, yes. This was the final episode of Star Trek written by Gene Roddenberry before his death on October 24th, 1991. And this was written way back in 87, but he just didn't write another episode after this one until he died in 1991. So it's the last Gene Roddenberry kind of stamped episode. Well, I'm glad it was good then. Yeah. If this was a piece of shit, I'd be like, Gene. And a lot of people think that after he died in 91 is when the whole thing could really take off, because his grip of control wasn't on it so much. They could really take more chances and experiment a little bit more. So that's why people love Deep Space Nine so much, because it really goes a completely different direction than a lot of other Star Trek. Data's creator's name is Noonien Soong, which is similar to the name Khan Noonien Singh. I thought that was a strange choice. Yeah, and the reason for that is Gene Roddenberry actually used both of those names in hopes of contacting a World War II buddy he had who had a similar name, and he had lost contact with that guy since World War II. And so he kept naming characters close to his name so that he would maybe write out or find him or something, because he has no idea what happened to him. So in World War II, he was in World War II with somebody named Noonien Singh? Apparently. Yeah. Okay. It's interesting. And our old friend Biff Yeager reprised his role as Chief Engineer Argyle from... This is like the only other time, right? Yeah. Since where no one has gone before, the opening episode. And this made him the only Chief Engineer to be seen twice during the first season. So he's... So what we learned about in the first one is that he started his own letter writing campaign, basically where he bothered fans. Mm-hmm. And they were referencing things from a future episode. Since there were only 2 episodes he was in, this is that episode. This is that episode that fans wrote in that they loved before it existed. Exactly. It had to be. It had to be. He was only in 2. So then, like, no, get the hell out of here, you weirdo.
So, while quite popular with fans, the line "Shut up, Wesley" is not appreciated by Wil Wheaton. In fact, he has repeatedly asked his fans to stop saying it to him as he finds it degrading. Definitely, as an adult, you would. An early story for this episode was named Apocalypse Anon, and in this story, the Enterprise D was on a rescue mission on a planet, and part of the away team was a female Starfleet officer with the name Minuet, who fell in love with Commander Riker. Riker was shocked when he learned that Minuet was an android. And later, they scrapped all that, obviously, but later on, we do have episodes with a love interest for Riker called Minuet, so they kind of brought it back in a little bit. So you'll see about that later on. The crystalline entity was originally created using CGI, a fairly uncommon technique at the time, especially for a television show, because usually it was too expensive back then. So when it came time to remaster the first season of TNG in 2012, there were no original elements for the entity available, as it never existed on film, and the original computer files were long since lost. So the entity had to be recreated from scratch, with the resulting reconstruction appearing notably different in shape, color, and texture. But we saw the remastered, so it looked good to me. So because I was made in 2012, basically. Brent Spiner suggested that Lore be made Data's evil twin. Initially, Lore was to be neither evil nor a lookalike of Data. In fact, Lore was created as a female with the intention of being a potential love interest for Data. So that would have been a whole different kind of story. I like the way they went with it instead of love interest for Data. But Steve, what are our Trek Connection Muppet connections this time?
Oh boy, do they exist. Well, I hope you got the soundboard ready, and I forgot to warn you.
Oh, that's
Hal
fine.
Linden was, of course, on an episode of The Love Boat. And as we have established throughout the 100+ episodes of this show, there are many people were both on Love Boat and in Star Trek in one-off, one-episode, single-shot sort of deals.
Absolutely.
Including guests in the Muppet Show, Character of the Weeks from Star Trek, the original series, and beyond. On the Love Boat. And then Barney Miller and Star Trek The Next Generation, because Barney Miller was also on about the same time, because it was on until 83. And both had a like guest actor of the week kind of format. There's just an incredible amount of actors that did both shows. Oh, the biggest names I could find were James Cromwell,
right,
Larry Hankin, and in the most recent episode playing Kaczynski, the cocky guest engineer, Stanley Campbell.
Who was the second guy?
The list was Larry Hankin. If you look him up, you'll recognize him.
Oh, okay.
But the list was literally 15 to 20 people long.
Oh,
those
wow.
are the three like most notable ones I could pull out. But the two shows had so much overlap; it was incredible.
Oh yeah, folks! If you look up Larry Hankin, you'll be like, "Oh, he's in everything."
Same thing with Cromwell. You look him up, you're like, "Oh, that's who." But he's not a character. He's not an actor a lot of people know by name.
Character actor, yeah, super recognizable face.
So, Jarman, these were basically the same episode, which makes sense that they have so much crossover.
Oh, it's
in
true.
Acting.
Just like how what was once thought to be an inanimate object turns out to be a sentient being. That's what happened with Lore in Star Trek, and the banana that Gonzo tries to blow like a trumpet in the beginning of the episode.
Right. It screams at him. That was good. Both feature people swapping places. Statler and Waldorf taking over hosting from Kermit, and Lore taking the place of Data.
That's true. Similar thing. Both have instances where one character is mistaken for another. The bridge crew think Lore is actually Data on Star Trek, and Hal Linden thinks Fozzie is Rolf on the Muppet Show.
Both feature a kid wishing adults would listen to him and do what he wants. Robin, when he sings If We Ruled the World, and Wesley Crusher when no one believes him about Lore.
Shut up, Robin. Both have instances where people are expected, but then aren't there. The colonists on Data's birth planet and the Berlin National Opera Company on the Muppet Show.
That's fair. That makes sense to me.
We actually had different ones. I like it.
We did. I thought we'd have at least one or two the same.
There you go. Oh, what's that noise?
Transporter malfunction. Transporter malfunction.
All right. It's the part of the show where we transport one character from one episode to the other and vice versa because we're crazy like that. What you got for us, Steve?
Muppet Trek this week, I'm going to bring over Hal Linden to replace Lore. Just being charming as hell and playing the clarinet and then taking over the Enterprise.
That's what I had on there too.
Yeah.
I was like, I like the idea of him not even being evil. He just like is like a cool older brother that Data can have. Like,
I also like the scene where they look nothing alike, but for some reason, no one believes Wesley.
Yeah. He trades places with them and he's just like, what?
Hey, you see, they're different. Wesley, shut up. They're clearly the same person. But Data doesn't even play clarinet.
Shut up, Wesley.
Trek to Muppets.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bring over Wesley and have him perform If We Ruled the World with Hal Linden because of all the smarmy, because he's just being all smarmy and pissy. And then he gets thrown out of the dressing room for insubordination by Hal Linden.
Insubordination. Trek to Muppets. I'm going to have the crystalline entity come over to replace Miss Piggy.
I mean, that couldn't have made that number worse. That's certainly true.
Yeah, she finally ascends to this godhood being. She's beautiful and shiny, and she just destroys all other biological life in the Muppet Show.
That's right, as reality crushes in on itself.
Exactly. That's Miss Piggy. And that brings us to the end of episode 115 of MuppeTrek Podcast.
Join us next time for the Muppet Show with special guest Marty Feldman.
Woo, and Next Generation episode Angel 1.
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone. Just kidding.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek Podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.